I'm Cody Donarski, and this is a Northport News Break. I am joined today with Ryan Pieper, who is a urban forester with the Natural Resources Division here at the City of Northport. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Cody, and welcome aboard.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here. We're here today to talk a little bit about some of the trees and the urban forests in the area. I am originally from Buffalo, New York, and up in the Northeast. We're starting to see the trees turning colors, turning to those reds and yellows and oranges that are so beautiful. And we're starting to see some colors changing here on the trees down here. Is something changing down here that we're starting to get a more of a fall foliage down here in Northport? Or what's going on with some of the colors of the trees in the urban forests in the area?
So I'll start off with a little joke. I'm sure a lot of people around here know our seasons don't change quite like Buffalo does, but our license plates do. So that's the season changing that we are familiar with here. However, to answer your question with the leaf change, some of the species we have do naturally go dormant this time of year. And just before dormancy or leaf drop, they do start to kind of brown out, or some of the maples or sweet gums that you see around. I notice the cypress seem to be kind of the first, but these years post-hurricane, we have some unique circumstances to kind of also mention. They've gone through quite the stressor events of Helene and Milton. So a lot of the browning, premature browning that we've seen were due to what's considered leaf scorch from the velocity of the wind.
Okay.
Also, when they encounter such a wind event of that magnitude, the leaf surface actually has little tiny holes that allow natural evaporation to take place. So when that wind goes across at that velocity, it really dehydrates the leaf, and they
It's kind of like our skin when we go out and, like, again, being from Buffalo, being out there in the winters, the cold winters, you can get windburn because the wind's coming across your face and drying out your skin. So it's kind of similar. Leaves kind of...
Exactly that. Exactly. You'll sometimes see trees being transported down 75 with tarps over them for that very reason. You don't want to spend thousands of dollars in landscaping to have it show up on site with half defoliated and the other half's browning out from leaf scorch. So that's a lot of what we're seeing. Some trees are more susceptible than others. They have a thinner leaf surface, or they're more suitable to that type of damage occurring through the wind events.
What are some of the things that residents can do to protect their trees? You had mentioned, when you're getting trees transported on the highway, they cover it with tarps to prevent some of those things, that browning from the velocity of the wind, dehydrating those leaves. What are some things that residents can do when they know that the high winds are coming, or some of the salt that gets onto the leaves and helps dry, or not helps, but dries them out? What are some things people can do to protect their trees?
I would say, just proper pruning practices leading up to any event, or just good practice in general, is to have a tree professional evaluate what could happen should it encounter that wind event, whether it be an oak tree or a palm tree. Each can be pruned in a manner by which it would allow for the form to take shape that would allow for it to sustain and endure a wind event of such magnitude. The most structurally sound tree is one that has a central dominant leader. So we take them out of their natural forest environment and put them out in the middle of a field somewhere. Well, it's got light coming from everywhere, so it's growing everywhere, and it's actually competing with itself. So if it has multiple leaders or dominant leaders that are fighting with itself within that tree, you can prune it in a manner by which it will allow that single central dominant leader to take shape over the years. And you have different species. Each are going to have their own kind of growth pattern or genetic predisposition to become a certain shape. Like palm trees, they're really suitable for this environment, but not to say you can't prune off half of the canopy. So it's not capturing that wind sail and allowing it for it to come over in a wind event. They're very dynamic and resilient in that nature, but we can do things like maybe even thinning the canopy to allow the wind to go through it in a manner that won't capture all that wind and offer so much resistance to the wind.
Instead of being a wall of leaves,
Yes.
it's got some places for the air to go, so it's not just hitting a wall and has nowhere to go.
Absolutely.
What are some of the things that we can do to help the trees recover? Some of these storms, the high winds are inevitable at times. We can't control that. What can we do to help the trees? What can we do to nurture them to make sure that they get back to their fullest?
That's a wonderful question. Directly after the wind events, we see it just brown out. And you're like, oh my God, everything's dying. It's everywhere. So it's ever present. And we're like, oh my God, we're going to lose all these trees. So they are incredibly resilient in their own nature. So in some aspects, they're able to recover fully on their own. I'll liken it to a bank account. They do store a lot of the energy production that they create throughout the year, the growing season, and the root system. So it's going to see what is best suited for that expenditure in that moment as it advances through the season. Some of the trees, now that we're kind of entering into the dormant season, they might not put on the other canopy that it could if it was on the other side of the year. It just might not see that being a lot of return on investment, especially if it's just going to drop them within the next couple months. We live in such a unique environment that it might be valuable to go ahead and put on all those new solar panels to reestablish the expenditure lost, the money lost, and reestablishing that canopy. But what can we do? We can always make sure that we're applying fertilizers at the right time and the right type for the right species. That's going to help it gain more for that bank account should it encounter a stressor. If you think back, it's hard to imagine that May, we were exiting a serious drought, major stressor. Then we went right into rainy season. We were oversaturated, another stressor. Into 2 hurricanes, multiple stressors. So all of these events are significant in their own right, especially within the amount of time. That's only like 6 months. It's encountered 4 significant stress events. So be mindful of how to give it proper nutrients in the root zone. And for the long period of time, we do have a fertilizer ban. So we don't want to be applying fertilizer within that window of time. However, if we're able to have granular time release, slow release fertilizer in that root zone throughout the time and months that we're allowed to have that, definitely invest in that, because the likelihood of these trees and ornamentals that we plant everywhere, these are significant, investments into your yard or the city in general. So if we can make sure that those investments are appreciating over time and we're doing the best things that we can do, as far as pruning practices and delivering the proper amounts of water, space, sunlight, and nutrients, then we're getting it in the right direction the best we can.
Where can our residents go to find out information about when they can fertilize or the type of fertilizer to use? Any information that they could use when looking at the trees in their yard or the greenery in their yard and knowing what to fertilize, when to fertilize, and how to best recover? Where can they go for some information?
Great question. There is a fertilizer ordinance in the city that is available on the website to know exactly the verbiage that's in there. I want to direct them directly to it. And just like the label on the fertilizer bag itself, the label is the law. So that's going to be exactly what you want to follow, depending on what type of fertilizer you get. Some are water soluble, some are time release. So understand what the objective is and know the product itself is going to be the right one for the right species, because you don't want to be putting palm fertilizer on grass and vice versa. So exactly the prescription for the right patient.
Perfect. I love that. For some of the more densely forested areas, what are some of the best practices in maintaining those areas? Out in a yard, your trees are a lot more spaced, but in a more densely forested area, what are some other things that can be done in those areas?
Okay, so it's always good to kind of get up leaf litter, old duff layers of pine needles, that suppresses other generations of growth that can come up. Definitely properly identify exotic species and keep those at bay the best you can, because those are always going to outcompete our natives. And we need to have a healthy forest that's full of our local natives that are going to provide habitat that is suitable for our squirrels, our birds, our species that thrive in those areas.
We spent this time talking about how the trees have kind of been hurt by these storms or by the drought that was experienced in the spring and early summer. But what are some of the things that the trees do when the storms come around? And how they can mitigate some of the effects of these natural disasters or droughts.
It is amazing how all of this is a cycle, right? So some ways are, trees get somewhat of a bad rap when it comes to the developed world and the undeveloped worlds. They couldn't be more contrasting in nature, right? They were here first. We kind of plug ourselves into them and expect them to not interrupt our day-to-day operations. And when we're seeing them on the news, you see that tree blown over on a car or the big pancakes in the air with all the root system exposed. Well, if you zoom out, you see that we have a sidewalk, a roadway, and we cut off all the space that it could have been what it was going to be. So I would like to say right tree, right place. And they do get a bad rap because they do help lessen some of the wind velocity as it would encounter your home. As it does go and blow through the forest or the canopy of a tree that's out in front of your house, it's going to significantly buffer the wind velocity as it would encounter your house without that canopy involved. So that's one way. Stabilization of banks is another big one for stormwater. The water comes up so fast in these wind events with the storm surge. And just over deluge, coming up into these events, we've typically encountered so much rainwater as it is that a lot of the soil is already saturated. So the stabilization of the roots underground really does help from runoff. And then also the transpiration of the water post-event, that it does help evaporate and pump the water back into the atmosphere in a cycle, the hydrologic cycle. So that's a couple ways. They do absorb a lot of nutrients before they find our waterways that do cause those algal blooms and red tides and things of that nature. So they're working hard for us, and they're doing a lot that we kind of don't always recognize that because we can just take advantage of that and benefit from them without, understanding it fully.
Before we wrap, I just want to give you a moment to share if there's anything else that you would like to mention about trees or resources for the community, whether it's about maintaining trees or preventing any issues that may arise or helping them recover from a possible storm. The floor is yours on this.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for the opportunity. And it is a wonderful opportunity to get out there to the public that we as a Natural Resources Division are available as a resource to anybody who has any questions or concerns about maybe a dead pine tree that's looming over your property next door, or what is the condition of this oak tree? It looks like it's going to die. What can we do? What can't we do? Our website has quite a bit of information available there as well. I'd also like to highlight IFAS, which is the University of Florida's Agricultural Extension Service. It is amazing the amount of information that's available on there for just about any question you can come up with. But we are available at the extent of the email that you are willing to send or the phone call that you want to make. We as a division are here for a reason, and we're eager and here at any moment in time for you guys.
Absolutely. And on the IFAS, I know we had talked about pruning your trees and proper pruning techniques, and I know that they go into that as well, correct?
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining me, and this was a Northport News Break.